Hello, people. It's me, Warwick Weston Wright, your sanctimonious, altruistic communist friend here. A while ago, posted a video about criminal nature. I believe the video was entitled "Some People Who Smoke Marijuana Have Melanoma." Bit of a weird title to a video, but basically, in this video, I mentioned a philosophy, "They will come to you" philosophy, which is a kind of explains the nature of how criminal rings work and how things in society and how criminals get away with things, how criminals work. Um, I wanted to elaborate on this "they will come to you" philosophy because I don't really think I really expressed it well enough of how this is kind of the primary mechanisms of how criminal rings work. This is kind of summarize of what I said. In a summary, what I'm going to talk about this video, I'm going to talk about criminal rings, and I'm going to go on to talk about paedophile rings. I'm going to talk a little bit about how paedophile rings and criminal rings aren't really different things and how the politics of both criminal rings are really intertwined. I'm going to close up by talking personal talk to people that may have been victims of sexual misconduct and how to deal with it in a kind of a supporting type of context. So I'm going to start out with ordinary criminal rings. Now, the nature of evil is insidious, insidious meaning slow and subtle, but with harmful effects. There's a big trend now. Well, the trend's always existed, but the trend's a lot stronger now. But there's a very strong trend with criminals getting involved at an early age now, and at adolescence age. It's quite shocking, but I suppose a lot of people that maybe have the same level of awareness of me are probably aware that children at adolescence age 9, 10, 11, 12 years old are brainwashed into this don't narc ideology, don't grass no matter what. And this is kind of been indoctrinated into children to the point where it's really normalized in a propagandist type of way. Now, the criminals, there's kind of a little cycle going on. When a person gets involved in crime nowadays, they used to get involved at a lot later age, but now they get involved younger. And it starts out with someone indoctrinating a child with the don't narc ideology, and if a child doesn't narc, this is enforced with fear, with both shame and fear, for a child to believe this. And what's happening is adults like myself, they're given into criminal fear and they're not putting the children straight out of fear of the criminals. And this is what's happening. And what's happening is a criminal might say something in a tone of anger and rage and say, "There's nothing more I hate more than informers and paedophiles, or grassers and nonces," as the English would say. And what happens is, by using a tone of anger and rage, the child or the adolescent comes to believe that grassing or going to the police, informing, is a really, really bad thing under all circumstances. And they're taught to be ashamed of it, and they're taught to be afraid to go to the police because the criminal said it in a tone of anger. And now people like me that stay on the right side of the law, instead of putting the child straight, say, well, if you go to the police, if someone's going to stab someone and you can prevent a human being from being harmed or killed by going to the police, then isn't the person with the knife the bad person, and isn't the informer the good guy? But most people are too afraid to say that to a child for fear of what will happen to them with the criminal ring. And it's giving adults that stay on the right side law, it's giving into this fear, which is causing children to go off the rails because it has a brainwashing propaganda effect. If a child grows up hearing one side of the story, you don't grass, don't inform, you don't go to the police no matter what. If they never ever hear anyone say anything different, they're going to grow up believing that's true. Okay, so this is how it's working. So as a general rule, if I was to simplify the cycle, a person grows up believing never goes to the police, so they take the law into their own hands. Someone then has dirt on them for them to go from the police. They can use that to leverage to get them to do something worse. They get mixed up in the criminal ring so deeply to a point where so many people have so much information and dirt on them that criminal rings can order them to do things. They become dependent on the criminal ring to stay out of prison. And then what happens is, when they've grown up as adults and they're trapped in criminal rings, they then have to brainwash children the way they were brainwashed in order for them to stay out of prison. Because if they don't brainwash the children below them, they will go to the police and they'll end up in prison. So it's this little cycle that goes on. And the way to break this cycle is for people to not give in to fear. That's all they need to do. They need, if they hear an 11-year-old child say something, like if an 11-year-old child says to me, "Oh, it's okay to sell drugs so long as no one gets harmed," instead of going and giving in to fear and not saying anything to that child because you're afraid of the criminals, you need to not give in to fear. You need to say to that child, and explain to that child that anyone that said that to an 11-year-old child is not your friend. Or, I mean, I've had a child come to me on the street and try to sell me marijuana. I said to that, I didn't go and give in to fear. I said to that child, "Son, who's ever got you selling drugs is not your friend." I didn't give in to the fear. Of course, it caused me a bit of trouble later on, but that seems to be kind of resolved now. But this is kind of how it works. It's propaganda. And to explain a bit further about the "they will come to you" philosophy that I mentioned in the last post, the mechanisms of criminal rings, the way they work to stay out of prison, is that they will always come to the person, surround the person that they're trying to kind of groom into a life of crime. And what they do is it's all about who you can trust and who you can't trust. The criminal has to look at who's around that child that we can trust, that the child can't trust, or that will lead the child astray. And what they'll do is they'll find out who that child trusts the most that can't be trusted. And when a child's about to do something or say something, children are easy to read if you know they're going to do something bad. So the ideology is they will come to you. They have to come to the child and get the information out of what that child wants to say. So they say it to a member of the criminal ring rather than saying that someone will go to the police. And if they don't trust that person, the criminal, that much, they say, well, why don't you go to Uncle so-and-so, knowing that Uncle so-and-so is easy to lean on or is a part of the ring, as it were. This is why that "they will come to you" ideology is a really important part of the criminal ring. And it's very, very important, this "they will come to you" ideology. It works on every part of crime and in the corrupt parts of the status quo. And also another important part of the status quo, or the rules of corruption amongst the police and the High Court judges, is that there's this rule, the status quo rule, an unwritten rule, is get the small guy, never get the big guy. Let the real criminal run and get the little guy, the idiot, the stooge. And the way all criminals work is that they always try to find the stooge and an idiot that's easy to influence, that wants to prove themselves. What they do is they indoctrinate this stooge with the "don't narc" ideology, the "don't go to the police" ideology. Now, when a real criminal spreads this ideology, they don't actually believe it themselves. If they're in a sticky situation, they will narc, they will grass, they will go to the police. They're like rats. They do anything like a rat. They'll do anything to survive. And what clued up criminals do is they keep a stooge nearby. They run with them, commit crimes with them. And if anything comes on top is an English term meaning the police got involved, the long arm got involved. So anything comes on top, so the police gets involved. What they do is that person, the real criminal, will always grasp on the little criminal. And the way the status quo works, the policeman that's interviewing the person who's tight-lipped and won't grasp, they are then made to look like the real criminals. If that makes look, he didn't grasp, he didn't collaborate with the police, so he's the real bad criminal. And the other person that grasps, he's not that bad. You know what I mean? So he cooperates straight away. So what happens is they use that as an excuse to give the little guy a large prison sentence and probably let the big guy go, or at least get a very small prison sentence. And this kind of status quo is understood by the high-ranking police officers, not the bobbies on the streets. They're pretty good. They're all right there. And then like the High Court judges and the lawyers, they know the status quo. You stick to the rules. They read into things. They know that that's the stooge, and there's the one you want to give the real time to, and let the big guy go. And this is kind of an important part as well. And that the "they will come to you" ideology is a part of this as well. When they're on remand, waiting to be convicted, waiting to be sentenced, the real criminals that have got involved in things, that when they get a lesser sentence, that kind of stuff, that are on remand, they'll come to you and they'll send their informers of what you're going to say, what you're not going to do, and that kind of stuff. And this kind of the "they will come to you" ideology is a part of every part of the criminal ring, at every level of the criminal ring, and in the justice system as well. They will come to you, and the status quo of get the little guy, let the big guy run. This is a part of the system, and it's very, very much part of it. That they will come to you is what I'm really trying to explain here. These are the important mechanisms of what make criminal rings work. And now I'm going to go on to talk about paedophile rings. Now, the "they will come to you" ideology is actually much more important to paedophile rings. What happens is when a potential groom or someone that's into sexual misconduct wants to do something bad to a child or an underage child, they'll kind of look into things. They'll know who that child can trust, who that child can't trust, and what they'll do is they'll when that child is a victim of sexual misconduct, that child, all the people around that child who are part of the ring, they will go to the child. Remember the philosophy, "they will come to you." This is how they hold the conspiracy down. And what happens is that child then speaks to someone they trust about what's happened. Okay. And then if that child doesn't trust them that much, they might go to someone else. And that person will say, why don't you go to so-and-so, knowing that that person can be lent on to not go to the police or is a part of the ring themselves, either willfully or unwillfully. And because all those people around the victim don't really make a big deal of it, it kind of brainwashes the child to believe that this behavior is normal. The trick is to normalize bad things and to kind of, through means of subliminal suggestion, teach the child that this is normal behavior so it doesn't actually go any further. And it's, they might make the child feel ashamed like it was their fault, or they might use a combination of shame and fear, that kind of stuff. Or that kind of stuff. So it's how they keep the corruption down, if that makes sense. And this is kind of how like paedophile rings work. But also, I want to go on to speak about how paedophile rings and criminal rings, or the politics of them, are intertwined now. Because what's happening is, a long time ago, I'm 50 years old, so I remember the 70s, and I understand how truths have changed and migrated over the years through people's beliefs changing or what they've been brainwashed to believe. Now, in the 70s, if someone was sitting on a park bench feeding pigeons, watching the children play, providing that person was well known in the community, it wouldn't really raise any eyebrows. If the person wasn't known well in the community, it would creep people out a bit. Um, and in the 70s, if you wanted to have a pickup line when you're trying to pick up a woman in a bar, if you say like you really love children, this was like a pickup line back in the 70s. Whereas if nowadays, if a man says they love children, people think it's sinister or the person some kind of intersexual misconduct towards children. And what's happened is now, the children at a very young adolescent age, same age where they get involved into criminal rings, they're taught to associate their fraternal instincts or paternal instincts with sexual misconduct. So, say for example, a criminal might say in front of a child, "What? That man loves children. Is he some kind of nonsense or something?" They use a tone of anger and shame in front of a child. And again, the person like me around the child goes and doesn't put the child straight, doesn't say to the child what he should say. So, well, actually, you can love children, it doesn't mean anything. So what happens is, again, same with the criminal nature, with the grasses and nonces, the child grows up never hearing the other side of the story. They then believe that having fraternal instincts towards children that aren't your own, is somehow involved in sexual misconduct. So this is a psychological thing that's going on here. There's lots of psychology in criminal rings, because from a psychological point of view, all animals and human beings have fraternal instincts, the instincts to nurture, love, protect, and provide for children. And everyone has fraternal instincts, and it's completely natural. So what they do, they're teaching the child to deny a very big part of their own fraternal instincts. Normally, the fraternal instincts towards children that aren't their own, they're taught to be ashamed of this. Now, the way the unconscious mind works is, if you deny your fraternal instincts, the unconscious mind knows, see, to have fraternal instincts is to love children. So we all love children, whether we believe it or not. So the child is learning to deny their fraternal instincts. The unconscious mind knows that they do love children, combined with the belief that it's shameful, makes the child more likely to grow up to be a paedophile or have anger, rage, and hatred towards anyone that shows fraternal instincts towards children that aren't their own. So what happens is, you've now got this triple association. You've got the association between paedophiles, informers, and an unhealthy, unconscious association with their own fraternal instincts. So this is like a type. This is a type of pedo blackmail. Pedo blackmail is a very prevalent crime now, which isn't really being. People aren't aware of it because there's a lot of corruption in our society, even at a government level. And when the government doesn't address something, that is a part of the corruption. So children are growing up with this unhealthy association between fraternal instincts and sexual misconduct. The government is willfully involved just by being complicit and not addressing it or correcting it. And people like me go when someone's sending a child down the wrong path, and that's causing the problems as well. Those two things combined. And this is why the criminal rings and paedophile rings the politics are getting quite involved now, because these associations are going on at the same time. And I also want to put forward that, from personal experience, I'm old enough to remember the 70s when there weren't as many paedophiles around, and now there's a lot more around. And I know that it's to do with the psychology of these unhealthy associations. So this is kind of very important. So this post is as much about kind of tackling the problem and let people understand what's going on and making them aware of the true nature of how criminal rings work. Because by having known the true nature and making you hyper aware, it kind of prepares you to protect from these things happening again, and protect from like youngsters from going off the rails. Because most at the same time, I'm also trying to say, don't be too judgmental of criminals. No one was born a criminal. Something happens to them in their early life, bad influence, etc., circumstances, racism, so there's loads of things. So I believe, a very strong believer in Tupac Shakur's famous saying, hate the game, not the player. It's a very, very true philosophy. So don't hate the person, hate the game, hate what they do. So anyway, this is, and I'm going to give you another example also of how say a criminal ring and paedophile rings get intertwined. I'm going to give you a little example, a little play example. Let's imagine a little scenario. I'm going to play devil's advocate again here. Let's say, for example, you have an 8-year-old child that's a victim of minor sexual misconduct. Say someone masturbated in front of this child and ejaculated in front of this child. This 8-year-old child tells his 12-year-old brother, tells his 16-year-old brother, but nothing happens. Because the child is only 8 years old, they're too young and innocent to know what's happened, they don't think anything of it. That child grows up to be an adult, and then they reflect back on something. Hang about, I told my 12-year-old brother and 16-year-old brother what happened to me. They're old enough to understand what was going on. Why did nothing happen to this paedophile that did this to me? And then I reflect back and think, well, actually, this guy, they grow up without any opportunities. They got involved in crime early. The 12-year-old brother and the 16-year-old brother is involved in crime. So I'm thinking to myself, hang about, maybe this paedophile knew about the crimes of the 16-year-old brother and the 12-year-old brother. So they couldn't go to the police because the paedophile would say, well, I'll go ask you for doing this. So you start to think, so this is a really silly, rudimentary example of how paedophile rings and criminal rings, the politics are involved, you see. And the reason why criminals say don't grass no matter what, even if it's a paedophile, is because if a paedophile gets grasped on and it gets to the police, the politics are intertwined and it can actually have a knock-on effect of other people getting arrested and they themselves getting arrested. Criminals put this idea forward that criminal rings and paedophile rings are separate to protect their own interests. They might, oh yeah, I may sell heroin, don't do this, and if a paedophile comes around, I'll pop a sort on that. So I mean, make out the criminal, the heroin dealer, as a heroin dealer is the good guy. They try to do this, but the truth is, heroin dealers, criminals, they make out they care about sexual misconduct towards children. They don't care. They might generally care as a second thought, but the primary thought is like a rat, anything to survive, anything for themselves. If a heroin dealer tries to convince you that he really cares about keeping the street clean of like perverts and that think again, they don't give a shit at all. They really don't care. And if you believe that, you're an idiot. But also, you understand that if someone is in town that say stays on the right side of the law and no one has anything on this person or leverage to prevent them from going to the police, they are the biggest threats to the criminal rings, and they're the ones where they normally use pedo blackmail on them. Like, for example, they might say something like, oh, well, we'll leave out a document and let someone find it, and that will convince them that maybe you're into sexual misconduct. Or another something which is even more extreme, I want to kind of talk a little bit about subliminal violation here. Subliminal violation is a lot more common in the criminal world than people think, and this is really heavily, not just in criminal rings, but it's actually extremely prevalent in prison environments as well as through the legal system when people get like convicted and sentenced. But basically, see, when a person is on heroin, and I'm going off the subject a bit here, but when a person's on heroin, their mind is in a very pliable state and they can be forced into a state of deep trance hypnosis very easily. And one of the real reasons why heroin is so addictive isn't so much for its physical qualities, but as standard procedure, a person's mind at some time in their taking of heroin is always violated in a way that they put them into deep trance hypnosis, make suggestions which keep them addicted to the drugs and also influence them into doing really, really bad things or not doing good things when they should do. Now, of course, you can't hypnotize or subliminally violate or subliminally manipulate a person to do something that's not in their nature, because a person's beliefs and a person's nature go hand in hand. But as a criminal gets more and more into a criminal ring and more evil, their belief systems slowly digress to the point where they do become evil. And then that hypnosis and that subliminal violation has a more powerful effect on them than a very, very bad person. So you must never underestimate what criminals get up to and how clever and intelligent they are. I've witnessed subliminal violation on a criminal level in my personal life, so I know what I'm talking about. And there are some cases, like, for example, if a person wants to spread a rumour about someone, they've got nothing on them, they might spread a rumour about someone that they're a paedophile because they're really a grass, if that makes sense, or really an informer, they want to get rid of them. Now, criminals do this as a last resort. They normally don't use pedo blackmail like some people. They use it for the strongest people that are the biggest threats, because they constantly call people paedophiles that are informers all the time, then it won't work. People won't pay any attention to the rumour. So criminals always say that, let's just ignore the rumour. So they use it very, very rarely and conservatively. And in some really kind of extreme cases, sometimes they will violate the mind of a young child, maybe 10, 11, 12-year-old child, to make an innocent comment, passing comment to really incriminate a person, make them look like a paedophile when they're not. And that sounds hard to believe, but criminals can be very, very sick. The people that do this to their own children are extremely rare, but criminals, there's a whole saying, evil knows evil, and criminals know who the most twisted people are, and they have a way of finding the most twisted people, and they'll find this one person in 1,000 that will do that to their own child to uphold a criminal ring, and they'll find that one child, and they'll do things like that. They'll violate a child's mind to really make something look convincing that someone is guilty. And also when it comes, this will let you know aware of how deep criminal rings go. We're trying to make you aware here. Or another example, if you could talk about sometimes you get criminal rings and paedophile rings where the ringleader is literally below the law and can do anything they want and get away with it and never get convicted. And I'm going to give you another example. Let's say a person is a paedophile and they interfere with their own daughter. And some will make this out that it's like something, what's the word? Because this does go on in society. Let's say, for example, as a result, someone has someone in their family who is an auntie, but also a cousin, i.e. they actually raped their own daughter and they got pregnant. Now, the existence of someone who is an auntie and a cousin is bang to rights, rock solid evidence of a person's guilt. You cannot get away with it, but they'll get away with it anyway. So sometimes you have to be aware that paedophile rings and criminal rings, sometimes they're literally above the law. When there's overwhelming physical evidence, they get away with it. And it's a real shame, it is a real shame. So just to be aware of things like that, of what actually goes on, and how this kind of works intertwines with each other. And also, I want to now start talk about and address people that are victims of sexual misconduct. And I want to kind of talk now in, a therapeutic way to support people that are victims of this. Now, I want you to understand that if someone accuses someone of rape, adults, it's very hard to tell when an adult is lying or not. But with a child, see, there's never any excuse for someone to get away with interfering with a child. And the reason why is the difference between paedophilia and rape is that adults are good at lying, children aren't. If a child says someone interfered with them and they say that when they're a child, that person is bang to rights guilty. They should go to prison. Absolutely go to prison, no question whatsoever. Because you see, when a person, if you reflect, if you're a victim of sexual misconduct and you're an adult now and you remember telling people about the crime when you were a child, I hate to break the bad news to you, but you are a victim of a paedophile ring, and it's a good chance the police are involved as well, because you have to understand that as an adult, you have to understand children can't lie. Interrogating children is like shooting fish in a barrel. You have to understand that. But at the same time, as an adult, this is something that all victims of crimes of sexual misconduct, whether it be rape or paedophilia, underage sex, this is something we all have to accept. And it's very hard to do this, but it's a path you have to walk alone. If someone came to me with this problem, I can give you all the sympathy you want, all the support you want. But if you come to me as an adult, you can make me, at most, you can make me believe you. But there's big difference between believing a person and knowing something. As an adult, you can never ever make someone know that you were a victim of sexual misconduct. You can't. As an adult, and you have to understand, sometimes as a victim, they believe that everyone is a part of the paedophile ring, or everyone thinks this is normal. And that they will come to you part of the ring is a part of how they convince people of this. It's like, for example, people don't think outside the box as a victim. They think because everyone they spoke to normalized it and didn't do anything about it, they think it's normal behavior. But they don't realize that the people in the paedophile ring came to you. Remember the philosophy, they will come to you, they came to you. so that you spoke to everyone. And once you've spoken all you want to speak, you spoke to people in the criminal ring, and they came to you so that it wouldn't go outside the criminal ring. This is what happened. And when a person speaks, when you speak to a person as an adult, you might think it's normal. Oh, they don't believe you, and you get upset because people don't believe you. As an adult, you have to look at it from the other side of the story. If someone came to you as an adult and said someone did so and so, you have to respect it's not a fact, it's a rumor. No matter how much you believe it, it's a rumor, and they can't know it's true. So you might think they're not on your side and they're part of the paedophile ring as well, or they're normalizing it. They're not normalizing it. Most people believe this is very, very bad behavior and it's terrible and it's not normal. But you have to understand, I'm an adult. If you speak to me as an adult, you can convince me to believe you, but you can't make me know it happens to you. You can make me believe it. And as an adult, I cannot persecute another human being based on a rumor. I can't, and you can't either. So as adults that have been victims of this, we all have to accept as adults, it's a path we have to walk alone and accept that people won't believe us. And if they do believe us, they can't take our sides because they'll be persecuting someone of the strength of a rumor, and that's wrong. But if you are a victim of this, and of course, it's all about subliminal suggestion as well. Say, for example, statistically, the government put out these statistics that the majority of people that are abusers were abused themselves. Okay, now this is the power of suggestion. I've always said this little Bruce Lee philosophy: if this is true, that is not necessarily false. So if most abusers were abused, that doesn't mean that most people that were abused turn out to be abusers. You see, so and this is another thing where people get treated very badly if they were abused, because people that were abused get treated like abusers where they weren't. And as far as statistics is concerned, you can get statistics on how many abusers were abused because they're in prison and they're being convicted. You get statistics on that. You can't get statistics the other way around, because if you interview someone that doesn't have a criminal record, that's been abused, of course they're going to say they're not an abuser. So you can't get statistics the other way around. So it's all about suggestion, and there's lots of psychology in this. But if you were a victim of this, just bear in mind that if you reported it as a child, then you're a victim that means you're a victim of a paedophile ring, and it means there's people in your family that you trusted implicitly but can't be trusted. Now, I'm not saying they were willfully a part of the paedophile ring and your abuse. They might have been lent on. They might have a criminal nature themselves, and someone lent on them and prevented them from going to the police. Because people can be selfish like that. People can be weak. But the way you can correct this, if you're a victim of sexual misconduct, is one, when you see it happening to another child, don't go put the child straight and understand the nature of the way criminal rings work. And when you know a child's been interfered with, tell someone, but don't just tell one person, tell two persons, tell three persons, tell four persons, until something happens, because you might go to a person and that person might be a part of the criminal ring as well. You have to keep on telling people until something happens, until it goes outside the paedophile ring, until it goes outside the criminal ring. And you'll know where that happens because the person will get convicted. Because a child cannot lie. They can't get away with lying. You must understand that. So the way to kind of prevent this from happening again, whether it be criminal rings, whether it be paedophile rings, if you're a victim, understand the nature of the way criminal rings work. Keep on telling people until you get a result, and don't stop until you do that. But also understand that just because people don't believe you as an adult, that doesn't mean they're normalizing the behavior. It doesn't mean, I think this behavior is very, very disgusting. Sexual misconduct is a terrible, terrible thing. But I also will treat you the same as everyone else does. I'll act like I don't believe you, and don't hold that against me. Don't hold it against other people. It's a part of who we are. If a person truly has a sense of morality, they won't persecute another person based on a rumor. So you have to accept that. Anyway, I'm going to close off the speech now with my normal closing speech. A person's beliefs and a person's nature go hand in hand, as do a person's nature and their will. But most importantly, the beliefs, nature, and will of the collective generate the very reality in which we live. Only correct beliefs can set us free. So remember, a person's beliefs and nature go hand in hand. So don't let a child take on the wrong beliefs. Don't let a child be manipulated into taking on the wrong beliefs, which will cause them to go down the wrong path in life and lose out all the prosperity and the potential that they could have had in their life as a child. So with that, I'm going to close this post now. I hope what I've told you has sunk in, and I hope I've given you a deeper understanding of the "they will come to you" philosophy. and the nature of how the status quo works, about how they always get the little guy, not the big guy, and it's a willful, knowing part of corruption. So I'm going to close now and say, stay on the right side of the law, and thank you for listening. God bless, and have a nice day.